The SBA has just come out with entirely new guidance and an entirely new portal for paycheck protection loan forgiveness, and this will potentially affect 93% of PPP loans who are eligible for these changes. Now, I know I'm not the very first person to report on this. However, I wanted to wait until I completely understood this new process and had each and every one of my questions answered, because I just don't want to give out any false information, because I don't know if you're going to watch the correction video. So I wanted to make sure everything was accurate the first time. And after all, there's about 200 pages of documentation on these changes that I need to read through and completely understand before presenting it. So we're going to completely break down the new changes, this new release, how forgiveness works now on certain loans, what lenders are seeing on their end so you understand the back end process, and the information you'll need to complete forgiveness on your loan. So this might seem a little bit dense at first, but I strongly recommend watching all the way through if you have a PPP loan, and I promise I'll tie this all together at the end. Also, I do have one small channel update. Make sure you go and check out my Clips channel. I'll have that linked in the comments and the description of this video. On there, we have shorter bites of news events and just things going on, things that are reported on this channel, and some exclusive stuff that's only on the Clips channel. So make sure you join that. That way you don't miss out on any future information. So we're going to start this off with the press release that just came out about PPP loan forgiveness. So here's the release. We're just going to cover the highlights on all of this. We're not going to go through 200 pages worth of crap, for lack of a better word. So the SBA is launching a streamlined application portal to allow borrowers to apply for forgiveness directly through the SBA. Now, it is through the SBA, but it's more similar than not. You're going to understand what I mean by that. This new change will help rush relief to over 6.5 million small businesses. The new forgiveness platform will begin accepting applications from borrowers on August 4th. Lenders are required to opt into this program. So not all lenders will use this program, but especially small lenders will, and we really don't know which lenders will and which won't at this point. So I think it's important to just understand the process either way, because the process is similar whether they are using the portal or not. Now, 600 banks have already opted in, but again, it hasn't started yet, so we don't know exactly how many in total will use this portal. So first, we're going to cover loan forgiveness in general, the forms that are used, and then we're going to go into the changes. That way we can go step by step. That way there's no confusion through this process. So with loan forgiveness, first draw and second draw are pretty similar in what you can spend your PPP loan on. 60% needs to go to payroll, at least 60%. You can spend 80%, you can spend 100% on payroll if you want. If you're a solo operator, if it's just you, no employees, that's 100% to payroll. That's the most simple way to do a PPP loan. But other eligible expenses besides payroll are mortgage interest expenses, rent payments for business rent, utilities for business utilities, operations expenditures, which is really any software you use in your business, property damage costs that aren't covered by insurance, supplier costs, this is fairly open, and worker protection expenditures for COVID, to, those like plastic barriers, things like that. So you need to spend your loan on those things. At least 60% needs to go to payroll. 40% can go to these other eligible expenses. You need to have an 8 to 24 week covered period, and it has to be 8 to 24 weeks after you actually receive the funds deposited into your account for you to start the forgiveness process. And your lender needs to be accepting forgiveness applications, but you can't do it sooner than 8 weeks, no matter what. Many lenders still haven't even started accepting the applications at the point of recording this. Now, this may change if you're watching this at a future date. The 60-40 rule, that's what we just talked about. Staffing requirements for most people, that's not going to apply, so we're not going to go too in depth there. And then the forgiveness applications, the actual forms that are filled out, for most people, you will fill out this form, the 3508S. This is a very simple form. Over time, forgiveness has just gotten easier and easier and easier. And arguably, it's gotten a little bit easier with these recent changes. However, it's still confusing how it's being explained. So that's what I'm trying to do, is simplify this. So most people will use this 3508S. If your loan is $150,000 or less, you'll use this form. Very basic information you need here. You need your loan number, the loan amount, the disbursement date, the covered period, the period of time that you're looking to have the loan eligible for. If you're just a solo operator, most people are going to do 8 weeks. However, you could potentially want to elect longer if you want to apply the whole loan to payroll, for example. There's different circumstances where you may want to elect a longer covered period. the amount of the loan spent on payroll costs, requested loan forgiveness amount. If you feel it's the whole amount, then you should put the whole amount there. You're certifying that the loan is spent on correct things. You're certifying that the information is correct. And with this, you actually don't need to submit any supporting documentation. However, that does not mean that you absolutely won't be asked for more documentation. Some lenders will ask everyone for additional documentation. Some lenders will only ask for additional documentation from loans that they're suspicious about, or they just could be a random loan that, hey, send us some more docs, send us a tax return, send us some bank statements, things like that. But most people will not have to submit any documentation. You'll just sign this. Forgiveness is basically done. And I will say that in most cases, you're not actually going to fill out this form, print it off, scan it. This will be integrated into your lender's forgiveness portal. Now, if your loan is over $150,000, you'll use this form, the 3508EZ. Now, this form is used for just about everyone unless your payroll has gone down significantly. But we're just going to cover these two forms for this video because most businesses will use these two forms. It's very similar to the other form, except this one just has some additional calculations. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but again, this will go directly through your lender. They'll have some kind of integrated form, or they'll have the form on their site where you upload right there. It's more simple even than just filling this out. You shouldn't have to print it or anything like that for most lenders. But again, we have some changes here, but these are the forms that are being used. That's all I want to cover here. Okay, so we have some changes here with the documentation. So I'm going to cover this interim rule that just came out of this 29-page thing. There's only 3 paragraphs that I'm going to cover here. So first off on page 12, on or before the date the borrower applies for loan forgiveness, submit to the lender documentation adequate to establish that the borrower experienced a revenue reduction 25% or greater in 2020 relative to 2019. What does that mean? It means for your second draw PPP loan, you need to have shown a reduction of 25% in revenue comparing any quarter of 2019 to any quarter of 2020. You need to have documentation for that. The documentation includes your tax forms, could be annual tax forms, could be payroll tax forms, could be bank statements, could be quarterly financial statements, anything that shows that revenue reduction. Now the change, one of the major changes with the SBA is they are allowing for an alternative method to show that 25% reduction. This is called the COVID score. We're going to explain exactly what that means. But lenders who opt into this new program with the SBA will allow businesses to use the COVID score instead of submitting more documentation. Really, the issue is there's a bunch of small lenders who don't have the back-end capability to process all this paperwork. The SBA came out with an additional portal where lenders are able to use that portal and just streamline the whole process so it's a little bit less labor intensive. That's really what it comes down to. But after the launch of the direct borrower forgiveness process, borrowers will continue to submit loan forgiveness applications to their lenders rather than through the platform under the following circumstances. So there's people who will go directly to the SBA. There's people who will still go directly to their lender. You'll still go directly to your lender for loan forgiveness if you hit one of these criteria. The PPP lender does not opt into the program. The borrower's PPP loan is greater than $150,000. In that case, you'll use that form 3508EZ directly through your lender. The borrower does not agree with the data as provided by the SBA system or record, or for any other reason, the platform rejects the borrower's submission. So if the platform doesn't work, then you'll just do the regular forgiveness method. Now let's break down how this COVID score works as an alternative method to certify your 25% revenue reduction. And again, at the end of this, we're going to do a flow chart. We're going to piece this all together, so it's going to make a whole lot more sense, but we have to understand all the pieces first. So as an alternative to providing documentation for the 25% reduction, there's this COVID health score. Basically, all you need to do is you'll enter in your business information and they'll give you a yay or a nay as to whether your industry, basic factors about your business. It says the index combines multiple public and proprietary economic data sources. You can't find the exact information, but it's through Dun & Bradstreet who gather the data and then they get industry information as to the averages in an industry, whether there was payroll reductions or revenue reductions, and they just use that as a baseline. And if you hit those baselines and it says, hey, this business should be good to go, then you don't need to submit additional documentation. If they give you an no, it's not going to work, then you just have to submit your documentation and you'll still get forgiveness. But for most people, how it's set up anyways, it should be more simple. It should just be, this is my NAICS code, this is my business information, and they'll give you a yes or no, and it seems most people will get that yes, but we haven't been able to test it yet. Now you can test it if you really want to. Dun & Bradstreet allows you to do this yourself. However, I'm pretty sure you have to pay for it, and I don't really see much of a benefit in doing this ahead of time if we're being completely honest. So this just means if your lender opted in, you'll be able to use this alternative method to certify the 25% reduction. Now if we scroll back up here, we're going to go to page 29 on this document. I know there's a lot going on here. 29. Okay, so this is optional documentation. So like I mentioned earlier, for most people, no additional documentation is required beyond that 3508. You submit that, no docs required. However, some lenders, they'll say, hey, we need docs, so I want to cover everyone. For payroll documentation, this could be bank account statements, this could be tax forms, and for non-payroll documentation, this could be mortgage interest payments, business rent or lease payments, business utility payments, and payments for additional covered expenses. Most people won't have this, but some people will. And then here's how this platform works internally. We're going to go to page 5 now on this massive document. So you're going to create an account. You're going to upload your documents. You're going to fill in your information for your business on this new portal that's not through your lender. On this new portal, the information then gets sent to your lender, who gives it the yay or nay. If they give it a yay, it gets sent off to the SBA, who gives it a yay or nay. And then they give it a yay, and you get loan forgiveness. And again, this was really built because there's so many small lenders, especially the minority institutions, who weren't used to submitting and processing all of these loans. It's giving them less of a workload. That way forgiveness is much more streamlined. And like I've mentioned many times in the past, this program really was made to give businesses money. They just couldn't do another grant program, so they had to call it a forgivable loan. So it was made to give people money. That's why these processes tend to get easier and easier over time. Once the program especially is over with, that way they can just finish the darn thing up. And then if your lender is one of the lenders who is using this direct to the SBA forgiveness portal, here's some information on how the portal will actually work. This is the user guide. I'll have this link down in the description, but it is step-by-step on the actual portal. So like here's a picture of the front page, and here is the portal itself. It's identical. And it tells you all the information that you need, even from creating a username and password, which hopefully you don't need too much instruction on that. And then to the actual application submission, all this basically is this document placed onto a new portal and a way to just certify that 25% reduction. They're making it so complicated with these hundreds of pages of things. That's all it is. It's just a new way to apply for forgiveness. But the confusing part is we don't know which lenders are going to use this portal and which lenders are going to do it in-house. And that's why I want everyone to understand this. But this is very basic information that you should have, and there's no documentation that will ever be required that is something insane that you wouldn't have for your business as long as you're a legitimate business. If you're a fraudster, this might be the worst thing to ever happen to you, this additional portal, but if you're a legit business, it should help you out, if anything. And now that you have all the context, let's go over to the iPad and I'll break down step by step what you can expect for your various situation. So a new PPP forgiveness. This looks a little bit daunting, but I promise it's really not that confusing. So you receive your Paycheck Protection loan and you wait 8 to 24 weeks for your covered period to complete. This is when the forgiveness part initiates. Was your loan larger than $150,000? If yes, you need to be able to certify that at least 60% was spent on payroll. Your non-payroll expenses are eligible expenses, and if it's your second draw, you'll need to be able to certify with documentation that you had that 25% reduction in revenue, and the documentation could be tax returns, bank statements, or quarterly reports. Then you submit the Form 3508EZ directly to your lender. Usually this is in their own integrated portal. You usually won't have to submit the actual document. Your lender will process forgiveness and request additional documentation as needed. Most people won't need additional documentation. The SBA then processes forgiveness and your loan is forgiven. Now, if your loan was $150,000 or less, the process is a little bit different. Is your lender using direct forgiveness through the SBA? Now, first off, if you don't know, you'll need to wait for a notice from your lender. They'll send you some kind of email or notice that says, hey, we're doing forgiveness directly through the SBA, or hey, forgiveness is through our own portal. You'll get some kind of notice. Now, if your lender is not doing direct forgiveness through the SBA, which I suspect this is going to be large lenders who already have portals built. Most of them probably won't, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So if it's a no, forgiveness will be made directly through your lender through some kind of portal. You'll fill out the form 3508S, that one-page form. Usually no documentation is needed, but you'll still have to certify the payroll expenses. You'll still have to certify the non-payroll expenses, and you'll need documentation. You'll actually need documentation for the 25% reduction in revenue from 2019 to 2020. Again, comparing a quarter of 2019 to a quarter of 2020, 25% reduction. The lender will process forgiveness and request additional docs. If needed, the SBA will process forgiveness and your loan will be forgiven. Now, if your lender is using direct forgiveness through the SBA, your lender will notify you where to go to apply for forgiveness. Now, this could be directly through the SBA's portal, or your lender may just use the API from the SBA's portal and make their own portal. So it might be a little bit confusing there, but they should send you instructions. They will send you instructions on how to do this. They want the loans forgiven as well. Then you'll log in your portal and find your loan. You'll use your SBA loan number. You'll fill out the form 3508S or equivalent meaning just the same information that's on that 3508S, which is just your basic business information, your covered period, your loan numbers, things that you'll have. You'll complete the COVID score, which will certify the 25% reduction of revenue for you. In most cases, it should certify it because most businesses, most areas saw more than a 25% reduction in revenue. So if the COVID score passed, no revenue reduction docs are needed. However, other supporting documentation may be requested if you're just a random business who gets requested more information, or if there's some kind of red flag in your loan, you may have other documentation requested. So I think it's always good to have the docs there. Just things like bank statements, things like receipts for whatever you spent the loans on. It's good just to have the documentation. Now, if the COVID score failed, all you need to do is upload documentation showing that 25% reduction. So tax returns, bank statements, or quarterly reports that show that quarter to quarter, 2019 to 2020 reduction. And then in both these cases, the docs are then reviewed and approved by your lender. Then the SBA will process forgiveness, and then the loan will be forgiven and you are good to go. So there you have it. Hopefully I helped you make a little bit more sense of what exactly is going on with these changes here. Really, all in all, the SBA is just making it a little bit more simple, especially for the smallest of small lenders, to process forgiveness and not, have to spend years going through all this documentation where they're just not prepared to do so. So it should make things slightly easier for most businesses, even though the explanation of all of these things might be a little bit confusing. So I would like to thank you for watching. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you found any value here, and I hope you have a profitable day.